It was his idea of a pop song. There recently was a kind of coda to that because I discovered the situation was Oliver Smith, he was a brilliant theatrical designer, and when Oklahoma came along in 1942, I think, it was the season 42-43, and it broke all Broadway records, and it was a gold mine. Everybody connected with it became rich, including Oliver Smith. And so he became a producer. And his fundamental idea was he wanted to out-Oklahoma Oklahoma, but he wanted to do it from a classier angle. And so he bought the rights to a novel by Erskine Caldwell called Tragic Ground. To adapt it as a musical, he engaged Lynn Riggs, who had written the play that Oklahoma was based on. During discussions about who should write the lyrics, Lynn said, well, I have published a book of poetry. They engaged Agnes DeMille, who had made her first big splash with her choreography for Oklahoma. They engaged Agnes to do not only the choreography, but also to stage the whole thing. And as Agnes subsequently told me, when Lynn said this, we all had a look at his book of poetry. And we looked at each other long and hard. But anyhow, Lynn was supposed to do the text for the songs. And as composer, they went for Aaron, who at that point was absolute top of the heap. And Aaron composed, I think he did a total of 3 individual sections for the musical. One of them has survived. It's a song that Lynn Riggs had learned when it cannot have been an authentic folk song because it simply doesn't ring true, but it has survived as one of Aaron's first sets of, I think he called them old American songs. He didn't call them folk songs. It's called I Bought Me a Cat. And the other 2, though, one of them has disappeared totally. The other one was what Aaron was hoping would wind up on the hit parade. It was called Alone at Night. But Lynn could not read music. Aaron seriously annoyed Lynn by not setting his lyrics as he turned them in. Aaron approximately set them. And then he wanted Lynn to make revisions to fit the prosody that his melody required. And since Lynn couldn't read music, and since I knew both the people concerned, and Lynn was a neighbor of mine at that point, he had a piano, and I found myself sort of intercessor between the 2. And as a result of that, the song, Alone at Night, it had a verse and a refrain, and I played it so many times, I automatically learned it from memory. We skip now to 1982. It was the last time I saw Aaron alive. I talked to him on the telephone until his death, but I was leaving the eastern coast and was going to drive out to California, and I stopped and spent a night at his place in Peekskill, north of New York City. Also present was Vivian Perlis, who wanted to interview me because she was collaborating with Aaron on his memoirs. By that time, his brain was so seriously affected, his memory was terribly affected. And we had this 3-way meeting with me and Aaron and Vivian, and the subject of the song came up. And I sat down at the piano and played it, almost note perfect. There were a few spots where I was not totally certain. and did what I could to sing it. And Aaron was quite fascinated by this. He recognized his own style, but he didn't recognize the song. And by that point, his mental state had deteriorated to the point where he could ask you the same question repeatedly at intervals of only maybe a minute or two. And I remember one question he asked me at least 3 times was whether there was a date on it. And I couldn't get it across to him that the manuscript had disappeared. I didn't own it. On my way up to California, I stopped in Colorado. That was the first time after that I had access to a piano. And at Vivian's request, I sat down and wrote out what I could write from memory. I no longer had the verse in my mind, but I did have the refrain. And only a month or so ago, I had discovered in the meantime Lynn, meanwhile, has been one of the most famous native sons of Oklahoma ever. In Oklahoma City, one of the main streets is named after him. And I had found out that his papers had gone to the University of Oklahoma Library. And so I was in touch with them a number of years ago to find out whether they could find the manuscript for that song. They couldn't. But maybe less than a month ago, I discovered that there is a whole batch of Lynn Rigg's papers that his literary agent, after his death, had given to the library at Yale University. And that's where Vivian Perlis is connected. So I immediately swung into action there, hoping that the manuscript might turn up there. It didn't. So it seems to be totally lost. And as a footnote in volume 2 of Aaron's memoirs, done in collaboration with Vivian Perlis, says the only extant manuscript is the one I wrote out at an upright piano in Colorado.